Hey guys, before we start the podcast, I want to apologize for any beeping noises you might hear during the podcast when I am speaking. They'll be kind of faint. Evidently, the construction workers next door are still going for the world record of longest time spent going in reverse in a construction vehicle. It's been about 200 days. They still don't have the world record, so I'm hoping they get it pretty soon. Sorry about that. Enjoy the podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to what I guess I was calling the Elitist Roundtable last year. I think I was going to call it that, and then I just ended up not doing that because I don't know if the sarcasm was going to go well. But I think this time around, I think we can call it the Elitist Roundtable. Joining me for this annual podcast is Mr. Slayerage, the legend himself, World First legend himself, Slayerage for the Leviathan. Slayer, why don't you introduce yourself for those who might not know who you are?
What's up, guys? I'm Slayerage. I'm a big-time raider, do all kinds of raid challenges, have since Vault of Glass. Tried to do 2-mans, solos, 4-mans, any low-man content and any challenge content. I'm all over that. And like Datto said, World First Leviathan completion for my clan and I.
I said this last year, but basically Slayer is the raider that I want to be if I didn't have to make videos all the time. I would love to be doing all the crazy stuff that I see you doing on your streams and all that, just like 2-man Callus, 2-man Prestige Callus, and like all this other crazy stuff.
Yeah.
His links, by the way, are in the description. You should definitely go check out Slayer. But let's get to why we are here today. We're here to talk about Prestige raid thoughts on the Leviathan. But first, we're going to talk about normal mode. Just kind of like a general overview of normal mode. A lot of mixed opinions in the community about Leviathan normal mode. I really enjoy running Leviathan normal. You know, Gauntlet can get a little lengthy, but I really like how your time is respected in the way that if you are really good, then you will get done with it very quickly. But otherwise, I've never been able to like really pinpoint like where I would put it on a ranking list. Like every single time a new raid has come out, people were very quickly able to put together a list of like where it's going to go. I need to stop saying like, of where it's going to go on their list. And Leviathan, I haven't been able to place just yet. How are you feeling about normal mode? Yeah.
That exact thing, what I've been saying, or the way I've answered that question is that Leviathan is probably my second favorite raid right now, I think.
Okay.
Maybe third behind King's Fall. It kind of depends how you look at it, but it really doesn't feel comfortable putting it on like a spectrum with Wrath of the Machine being my favorite and Crota Zen being my least favorite. It feels like that's, I don't know, just not really a fair way to look at it. I do like the raid. I feel like it is an improved Vault of Glass. That's how I see it. But there's some elements of it that I really just I like that they experimented. I don't know that I would want to see them experiment twice. What about you?
Well, I would have to. Well, I mean, I did think Leviathan, in a way, was basically an improved sort of fusion of VOG, Vault of Glass, and King's Fall to a degree. I really like the hub layout. I like that there's wings that you go to. It's not just like a straight line. I've always kind of liked that raid design in terms of actually building the physical raid itself. It's just been something where I really like running it, but I also really liked running Wrath of the Machine, and I just don't know where to really put my finger on it. I don't know. It doesn't feel
really what separates it for me. Like that whole it's not really relevant to this game, but
Right.
Demon's Souls was the earliest Souls game in the Dark Souls series, and it had a hub world, and that kind of turned me off the title in large part for a lot of unrelated reasons. And I think the same kind of distaste for it still kind of applies a little bit with me in the Leviathan. I mean, it was definitely cool and unique to have to like go back to the Castellum, but in the World First Clear, doing the Castellum thing 4 times when it's basically the same encounter feels a little silly.
Yeah.
And then using the Leviathan or the Underbelly and skipping all of it also feels a little silly. So
Yeah.
I'm not really sure there's any happy medium to reach there. I don't really know how they could do that. It was cool.
It's
I
sort
liked the
of
experiment, though.
sorry, I keep interrupting. Keep going.
I don't know that I want to see them do a hub world style thing again, because it discourages me from actually going off the beaten path to get the chests, especially when they don't have like the Vault of Glass chests that were hidden had like the Vault of Glass cloak or bond or Titan mark, and then also the materials that you would get from it. Whereas these have tokens which aren't as good as the materials, and they don't have any of the actual armor. So that contributes, I'm sure. But it doesn't really feel worth going out of my way to go to the Underbelly in the middle of doing the raid, which I don't really care for that aspect of it. It is really cool, though. I think if they mixed it up a little bit more than just rotating things every week, I would like if there were actually like hidden challenges that were only available some week. And I know that's a lot of extra building, but I think that would add in a lot of replay value if it's like, yeah, this week there's actually an extra boss, and that boss has some rare drop or something to that effect. I don't really expect that to ever happen, but it would be pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, I would love for something like that to happen, but I think we're knowledgeable enough that we're very skeptical that will ever happen. You were talking about challenges, and I was thinking, he knows that challenge modes are coming, but I know what you're saying, like more than just the typical sort of challenge mode situation that we've been seeing for the past couple of years.
All the doors that are locked right now, just always locked. It would be cool if one of those actually had a room behind it that's only available certain weeks. So like you think you're going to the baths encounter, you go into the sun door, get to the end of the hall, and then right at that Cabal statue that's there, instead of taking a right down the long hall, you take a left because the right hall door isn't opening, and the left hall door opens, and it's an entirely new encounter. Of course, that'd be... That's a lot more work.
It's a ton more work, but I think that would be a lot of hardcore raiders or maybe MMO players' dreams to kind of see something like that. Yeah. The whole going back to the middle thing, I would equate it to almost Destiny's first trash mobs. So in a lot of MMO raids, you kind of have trash mobs in between bosses. Not too much, but it's just generally some stuff to clear to unwind after a boss encounter. Sometimes they could drop loot. And that's basically what Destiny's first time doing trash mobs, essentially. And I'm sort of indifferent to it because it is a nice way to unwind, especially when you have all your supers. You know, people are just popping Orpheus rig tethers nonstop and, you know, chaining their supers together. And it's a nice way to kind of bring the energy back down before or after an encounter. So that aspect I kind of enjoy, but I can totally see if people aren't a huge fan of that either, because it is kind of just, it's more busy work in between. And I know Bungie likes to have their downtime. They like having very high action, bring it back down, do another thing, bring it back down. And I don't think they wanted people just simply walking across to the other side of the map to go to the next doorway. I think that would have been kind of to them. So I can maybe see where they were going with it. But yeah, it's I could see how some people could be bothered with it. I think
it does work pretty well as a horde mode type thing, not really an actual horde mode, obviously, but it is pretty fun to just shoot the Cabal as they jump out of the doors and whatnot.
Right. The Underbelly is something that I think is going to go greatly underappreciated, because after learning the Underbelly and kind of learning, if we want to get all of our chests and keys and stuff, we need to learn how to navigate this entire place. It's going to be a very underappreciated thing, and I respect the time that Bungie put in to designing a place like the Underbelly, because it's huge. It is pretty circular in nature, but the fact that there's so many interweaving paths, and you can use the Underbelly to get all the different bosses from any other boss in the game or in the raid, and all of that, and all these hidden treasure chests, it's an insane amount of work, or what feels like an insane amount of work, for something that not a lot of people are probably going to see. And I cannot tell you how much I really respect that extra effort that they put into making sort of a labyrinth, secret-heavy sort of thing. Although, I guess a lot of the secret of it kind of goes away once you learn the entire Underbelly, which, to be fair, is a pretty massive undertaking for the average player.
I'm definitely with you there. I mean, the Underbelly is probably the thing that sold it as being like number 2 slot, probably like second favorite raid, because it's so much extra space, and then killing the Watchers to get to the chests and having to coordinate with your team to do that adds in a little bit of depth to the extra chest finding aspect.
Right.
I just wish it was integrate. Like I like the linear raid design generally because it can integrate the Underbelly type stuff along with the actual raid. Like what I think my perfect world would be is if the Leviathan were laid out from start to finish in more of a linear fashion, and then in each of the sections between encounters you could find some way to get into the Underbelly. Like if after the first encounter you had to pull these levers, and after the second encounter you had to press these switches, and getting into the Underbelly doing those things, you would be able to get to the chests kind of more sequentially as you complete. But
right.
I guess it feels like kind of it's separated from the raid, and I'd prefer if that wasn't the case. But it is a very cool area, and I definitely enjoyed exploring it.
Yeah, I think they maybe were trying to go for something where if you want to be the secret finder, if you want to venture into that sort of unknown area, you can do that without having to worry about also doing the raid at the same time. They ended up basically just cutting them in half. Like, okay, raids over here, secrets are over here. You can go do them separately if you want to. It sounds like you want a more sort of intertwined experience with something like that.
Yeah, I liked searching for those things with my raid team. I think that was part of the experience, was that it was intertwined. You had to have your raid team to do them.
Yeah.
But then the other aspect of it, not really. I mean, this is kind of a criticism across the board for the whole game. Is it is kind of not really worth exploring it on some level too. Like I haven't gone to the Underbelly most times because I don't really need legendary engrams if I'm doing the raid, and I don't really need Callus tokens that much either because most of the loot drops pretty generously. So there's not really anything for me to get in there because there's no unique rewards, and that makes it feel kind of like the patrol zones a little bit, where there's lost sectors, but there's not really any reason for me to do them.
We sort of had that experience as well with previous raids too, though. It's once you kind of max out on your gears. Hey, you want to go get the King's Fall secret chests for some moldering shards?
Yeah, that's true.
No thanks. I'm good on the moldering shards.
I think they really kind of nailed that best, I think, in Vault of Glass, but it was kind of maybe best is probably not the way to put it. With Vault of Glass, when you could go in and get your exotics, and it was the only way to have a good chance at getting Galahorn or The Last Word or Icebreaker, you'd want to go get that chest because it's like, maybe I'm going to get something amazing. It was like, you only get one roll on the slot, but there's a real possible payout that you'd love. And
right.
They've moved away from that, which makes sense because getting the exotics that way was, I don't know, it was not very fair for people that did get bad luck week after week. So a better system was needed, but I think this system takes the excitement out without really replacing it.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, if you do 3 keys, you're going to basically get 1 exotic every time, but even that is sort of not as appealing anymore given how easy it is to get exotics, so I definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, I was hoping they would not bring back 3 of coins, and I saw that they didn't, and I was like, nice, and then they
basically just gave everyone a permanent 10 stack of 3 of coins all the time for everything. Yeah. So all right, let's move into prestige mode here. General thoughts for prestige mode. I'll let you go first. For just the overall vibe of it.
Okay, overall vibe. I suspect the enemies are a little bit higher level than us. I think they're probably like 310-ish. When you die to them, it just has question marks, apparently. You can't actually see their light level, is what I've been told. And you can tell that they're a lot beefier, and people complained about that in the past, but I think it works really, really, really well in this raid, because yellow bars historically were always too strong. Like, they went from red health enemies to 10 times that for a yellow bar, but orange bar enemies are about twice as strong. So they still feel totally reasonable to kill, but now Centurions that I would one-shot with Wardcliff Coil or just easily burst down with Hawthorne Shotgun or whatever, those are actual threats. So when I'm alone in the Gauntlet, for instance, I can't just kill all the doors myself easily unless I'm on a Devour Warlock. Praise Devour Warlock. And I love that aspect of it. I love that I really have to actually fight to stay alive now, because if you let enemies overwhelm you on any of the encounters, in the dogs, if the Warbeasts start attacking you, you're going to die.
Oh,
in
yeah.
the baths, if you get 2 Scions next to your plate when a Bather comes out, you're probably going to die. You have to be on top of it, and I really like that aspect of it. I like, too, the fact that I'm not sure where exactly I stand on this, but it feels like a lot of things that they do for prestige mode, and in the past they have done the same thing for heroic modes, is where they, instead of just having everybody know individual roles, and you can work with that role and say, I'll stay in the darkness dimension, or I'll be the pollen carrier or whatever, they make you have to integrate roles or you'll fail. The best example being the way that the gauntlet worked, where you have to have all 6 people run. Like that kind of thing seems to be something they want to bring forward, especially after King's Fall challenge modes came out. It was clear that they wanted to make high-end raiders have to be capable of doing every job. And I like that and don't like it, because on the one hand, it raises the difficulty and makes it where everybody who actually participates in the prestigious raid really needs to be good at it, and that makes it rewarding for the sense that if you got through it, you are a good player. There's no two ways about it. If you can get through the prestige raid, you couldn't have been carried. You actually had to be good. And the one thing that I don't really like about it as much as I would like to see the introduction of more new mechanics. Like the one new mechanic in the Bads encounter, I literally figured out how that worked within about 5 seconds of seeing it, and then it didn't influence gameplay from that point forward. So
I'm assuming you're talking about if you don't kill all of the vials, you get that icon in the middle and you need to figure out where to go based on that icon, right?
I saw that I had Burden of Worthiness as soon as it appeared on my first attempt, and I was like, okay, what does that mean? I looked at the center, saw that it was Chalice, and I was like, someone's got to do something at Chalice. And then other people on my team weren't really, I don't think they were looking at the middle, so they didn't know what was going on. And at the time, that made me assume that maybe Chalice was just something important and everybody was seeing what I was seeing. And then over the next couple seconds of communication, it became clear that other people either weren't seeing something or were seeing something different. And it's like, okay, so I stopped, figured out which plate was which plate, and then we moved forward knowing that you have to go to specific plates after not killing all the vials. But after you know that, it works basically the same as before, because in the gauntlet, when you had to communicate with your teammates, like, I'll shoot top arrow, you shoot bottom arrow, I'll kill scions, you get plates, like, you had to communicate that kind of thing. But in the Bads encounter, you don't have any of that role-specific stuff to do.
Right.
So you just, exchange plates and then continue rotating however it is that we were rotating before, and it doesn't really matter who your teammates are because you don't need to work with them. You just do your job and they do their job, and it automatically meshes together.
Yeah. Yeah, I also kind of like how everyone needs to know everything. I think that is the hallmark of a good raider. You can be a good raider and know your specific role, but what makes people stand out from the crowd is knowing every role, right? When you're playing an MMO, a good raider knows their role. A great raider knows every role. And I very much enjoy the fact that you need to know every role for the prestige mode. Now, for people who do like specializing in a very specific thing, like, hey, I'm the throne room guy. I'm going to be on Raiden Strider, and I'm just going to annihilate everything. It's going to be great. For that, I can understand where people may be upset a little bit, where the prestige raid takes away their sort of specialty role where they knew how to do X thing incredibly well. But again, it's the prestige raid. It's not just normal with, some glitter on it. It's you got to know how to do everything.
Yeah, and beating it should be prestigious.
Right,
it should
exactly.
Be an accomplishment.
Exactly. So that aspect I did really like, but overall it provided the difficulty increase that I was looking for. Things don't die in one shot anymore to like a hand cannon. Things take extra shots. Like you said, the orange health bar majors are now much more of a focal point than they are just something you burn a couple of heavy shots on. Legend of Acarius, 2 shots, a Centurion and normal. Now it's 3 shots, borderline 4 shots. So they become much more of a focal point during, every 45 seconds or so of activity for those encounters, which makes everyone focus up a little bit more. Your gun skill needs to be much more on point. You can't just go around doing whatever you want. You actually need to play somewhat strategically, which is a refreshing change of pace from just rolling over everything. I had something and I lost it while I was talking about that. But yeah, just in general, I did really enjoy the difficulty bump of prestige mode from the normal. Pretty well tuned. I don't think anything was over or under tuned. Oh, but here's the thing I remembered. Some people have expressed to me their gripes about the reliance of power ammo in a couple of encounters, specifically baths, where if you're fighting a bather that comes out of the pool thing and you don't have power ammo, you might just be dead, or it can royally mess up your entire rotation. Maybe you don't have people in the proper position, and it feels bad to lose an encounter or die to something because you ran out of power ammo. Any feelings on that?
But I also think that is ultimately the result of poor coordination on some level, because the way that we tried doing the encounter in one of the groups I was in was having everybody or 4 people control a specific plate, and they would hold their plate, go to center, come back to their same plate, right? So there's no rotation at all involved, and each side would have a floater who would take over people's plate if they were going to the center, stay off the water if they were if they didn't need to hold either of the plates, and then alternate top and bottom back and forth, killing the bathers, because the top bather spawns first and the bottom bather, and it repeats that simple pattern over and over again. So if you have a bather spawning in and you have no power ammo to fight it and no one's helping you, the problem there isn't that you're out of power ammo so much as that no one's helping you. You really should have, within 4 plates and 6 players, the ability to back up one player if they're struggling, because there's not going to be a bather at both spots at the same time. So if you're not getting help, that's ultimately just not coordinating yourselves as well as you could. That strategy that I just said does work. I wouldn't say that it's easier. It's probably not. But
yeah,
the end point of it is that you should be able to say, I need help with the bather, and someone should be able to come help you. Because if you get off the plate for a second because you're fighting your bather, or if you have to stay on a couple extra seconds because someone's falling behind in their rotation, that's not the end of the world. What is the end of the world is if someone starts dying and then you have to go res them while they're not standing on their plate because they're dead, and then you pick them up, and the other person is now struggling because they've been alone for a lot longer than they were really supposed to be, and that sort of thing. Like, you really don't want people to die. So if someone is out of power ammo, all they have to do is say, I'm at Chalice plate, which you should know in Prestigious mode. I'm at Chalice, I have no ammo. Right side floater, you got to come to me. And obviously you don't have a designated floater in most strategies, but if someone's already on the dude's plate, when someone's on the Chalice plate, you know that you're the floater if you're not on dudes.
Do you also call that plate dudes?
I heard that you said that.
Yeah, we call it dudes. Well, it's axes, beasts, chalice, dudes, A, B, C, D. Right?
Oh,
it works out like
nice.
that.
Yeah, very good.
So A, B, C, D, that's why I wanted to do it. I would say even just on a gameplay level, 2 of the 3 classes have pulse grenades, and I understand maybe you don't want to play with Striker Titan or Stormcaller or something like that, and that's okay, but when 2 of the 3 classes have pulse grenades, 3 merciless shots and a pulse grenade will kill a bather, and bathers basically always drop heavy ammo, and they'll drop 3 or 4 shots for merciless. So every single time you kill a bather, you basically get that ammo back if you have a pulse grenade. Even hunters,
question.
Yeah.
Do you know if Stormcaller pulse grenades are on the same level as Striker Titan pulse grenades? Because I know they have a perk that makes them stronger. I don't know if it makes them last longer, have a bigger radius, or do more damage or what. But I think that on some level, pulse grenades are good in PvP regardless of what class, because they pulse so fast and it's impossible to get out of them in time.
Yeah.
But for PvE, do you know how the damage numbers compare for Stormcaller and Striker pulse grenades?
I think the damage numbers are the same. It's just Titans last a little bit longer. When we were doing Prestige raids, I was on a Warlock, and I was able to throw a pulse on the ground, 3 merciless shots, scoop in, grab that ammo, get all my merciless ammo back, and that was the end of it. There was just no help needed, nothing else required, just throw, voop, 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 done. And I got that ammo back. And then when you go to the middle, there's always usually a ton of power ammo in the middle. So even if you're getting to a thing where you're starting to run low on power, you will replenish most, if not all of it, just by going to the to the center area.
If you've had one failed vial phase, if you don't one phase it,
right
after the first vial phase, there's tons of ammo.
Yeah.
Like,
sorry, that got a little nitpicky. So I mean, I guess we can continue with prestige mode, talking about the baths specifically. Those ads are lethal. They are very lethal, as a lot of my group discovered. You really need to help team shot. You really need to have good coordination. You really need to hit your shots properly. All of that. It was the thing that caused my group to struggle the most, is just dying in that encounter messes up your rotations so much more than any other encounter, because it's so rotation heavy and because everyone's so split most of the time. You have 4 people at the corners, so they're already as split as possible. Then you have 2 people running through the middle at all times, and stacks are getting really low, so certain people can't stay around for a certain amount of time, and dying on that encounter is absolutely brutal. So I think the main difficulty of that encounter in general is just making sure that you can just kill ads. That's how much more difficult they are to deal with this time around, is just even a Scion or 2 will just sneak up on you and kill you. God forbid one of the Legionaries walks up with a shotgun into your face. Then, good luck. What do you think?
As far as dealing with ads goes, what I had noticed for my team is that probably the biggest singular issue was killing ads in middle, because I don't even really know why. The timing is the same, but we were always running lower on stacks. Like, normally someone would get to me when I had like 19 left on normal mode, but on heroic mode I'd have like 9 left, and it was not, for the record, because I was standing on top of a dead bather and having them knock my stacks off, which that's a new mechanic that would pretty easy to miss. But
I literally did not even know it was a mechanic until I was about to render out my prestige guide, and someone was watching and was like, why didn't you mention the bather mechanic? And I was like, what bather mechanic? So I literally found that out right before I put out my video on it. Yeah, it can be hard to miss if you don't just walk over them, which, I don't know why you would.
I mean, if you like standing in purple sparkly pools, then you'll probably notice, but otherwise it's pretty irrelevant. Killing the ads in the middle, though, like, there's no time for that, really, because when you're running through the middle, you want to get in and get out and help someone as fast as possible. And for our group, it really came down to stopping and killing those ads, because if someone winds up waiting for an extra few seconds on the plate and they run out of power and they have to get off because they hit 0, and, like, you can even stay on the plate for a couple moments after hitting 0. It won't kill you instantly.
It's not going to kill you.
It doesn't knock your health down that much. So it's not that bad to be a little late, but those ads in middle, if they get overwhelming, you can go in with full health to pick up the Psionic Protection and die before getting it. Like, they can absolutely shred you.
Yeah.
The left side of the room also kind of has a unique advantage. It's probably the better plate to be if you have, I guess if you know people on your team are better slayers for whatever reason. The left side plates can use scout rifles to help the right side plates, because the right side plates are stuck in that enclosure and they can only kill things that actually get pretty much within sight line of their plate,
right,
in very close range. But on the left side, if you have a scout rifle, you can shoot things that are spawning in from a bigger distance and help a little bit more. But I'm not really sure if any side has more ads. All I know for absolutely sure is if you let the ads group up at all, like if you're not on top of it, they will ruin your life.
They'll crush
kill you really fast.
Yeah, I'm usually up front towards the front of the room, and I would say being able to do crossfire with the person on the opposite side of you is really helpful, because both sides up front, you're able to shoot the other person's ads if you have a scout rifle, and just being able to team shot, even just killing one Scion can be a game changer for the person on the other side. Would you say it was? I would say it was definitely a good difficulty increase. I did like the burden of it's burden of worthiness, right? I did like that little touch, because it kind of makes your team scramble a little bit to try and figure out where they got to go, and then maybe you have to have new floaters at the beginning and just kind of reorienting yourself. But once you kind of get past that, it is the same old fight. But otherwise, I thought that was, it's a nice touch. But most of the difficulty from that encounter comes from the fact that ads just hit really hard now, and bathers are much more of a threat. And so I liked the difficulty increase.
I appreciated it more as an encounter because of higher difficulty. In normal mode, it was definitely my least favorite encounter in normal mode. Like, there was no question about it, because it reminded me in a bad way of the stand on plate and fire mechanic that just pervaded the entire King's Fall raid, where you just stand on a plate, shoot the War Priest, stand in the circle, shoot Golgoroth, stand in the stand in the aura, shoot the daughters, and so forth. Like, it was all just like, and stand on the plates for the totems as well. It's just stand on the plate, shoot some stuff. Like, you don't really have a whole lot of mobility, and it reminded me of that in a bad way, where I'm just like, I'm standing on the plate waiting for the Bather to spawn, and I've already killed my 2 Scions and the Legionary, and I'm just like, okay, well, I guess I'll try to shoot some enemies on the other side, but pretty much just standing here. But at any rate, in hard mode, killing ads was harder, and I liked that aspect of it. And then the damage on the vials came down less to just stand on the plate and shoot them after clearing the ads, and more to keep 4 people on the plate and keep 2 people to kill the bathers. So you actually had like designated roles that were more or less necessary. Whereas in normal mode, you didn't really have to bother with that as much, because the bathers were less of a threat and you could just deal with them as they came. But if you didn't have a plan in prestigious mode, it would kill you. I still think overall it's my least favorite encounter, but the difficulty bump up in that made it a lot more fun than how it was on normal mode.
It gives a greater appreciation for it, because normal mode is just such a stomp through that, again, like with normal mode, you don't even really need a plan for the middle. It's just kind of rotating supers. Like, all right, who's going first super? All right, you go first, and then whoever. And
you just, I'll go, and then 2 people go at once. It's like, okay.
Yeah. So moving to beasts, I think the obvious thing pre-launch of Prestige mode was they were going to add more dogs, and that's exactly what they did. 8 dogs instead of 6. The paths are changed up a little bit. The only thing I really noticed, or felt like I noticed, is that Prestige mode does not like you peeking. It does not like you peeking around corners to check on the status of dogs. It feels like their frontal cone got some sort of a buff, or something about the perception capabilities of the beasts got improved, or maybe something's just buggy. I don't know, but geez, they do not want you peeking. Don't peek. Let the people using the almonds do all the research for you. That was really the only thing that I noticed for doing the beasts at all. I mean, other than the fact that all of your old rotations didn't really work anymore because they changed the paths. It wasn't just add more beasts. It was add more beasts and then also like change some pathing options. So, but other than that, it is the same old beasts. I imagine most people adjusted their beast rotation in the form of everyone has their 6, or everyone has their 1 that they go kill, spread out to the 6, and then everyone else just kind of collapses onto the new one. That's what my team did. I feel like that's what a lot of teams are doing, just because it's pretty easy to kill your beast high stacks. Your thoughts?
I'm with you there. I think probably, for my group, one of the newer issues was, I don't know how experienced our crystal holders were on the encounters that I'm talking about, but the snipers, the beast handlers, when they spawn in, they are a lot more threatening than before. Like,
they can 3-shot you. Yeah, they can 3-shot you for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Or it feels like
they can. It might be 2-shot if you have low armor too. I don't know. All I know is that I had a crystal holder or 2 die because of them spawning in, and like I did a ton of crystal holding during the 2-man dogs attempts with cookies.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with killing them the instant they spawn in and looking for the right doors and that sort of thing. But if you're not familiar with that and you let them start shooting you, then that can result in a death that's a real problem, because the pollen holders can't just go revive you, and the other crystal holder has to go all the way across the map to do it. So it turns into a problem pretty quickly if one of those people dies. So you really have to be on top of killing beast handlers in prestigious mode.
Yeah, and not to mention that they have a little more health as well, or it feels like they have a little bit more health. They still,
probably do.
They still die pretty quick, but yeah.
The dog in the caves or rocks, middle left side or middle right side rather, whichever you want to call it. That dog is also a big pain in the butt to kill if everybody's just going with the standard rocket launcher for DPS, because it's the best. You don't really have much room to rocket him with it. 2 people especially, but even 1 person can struggle to get the room in without killing themselves. And the dogs, the war beasts, spawn right behind you when you're in the DPS phase. So that dog actually turns out to be a little bit of a problem there.
Yeah.
I think if you didn't have any familiarity with normal mode, heroic mode would not be very different at all, because it's
you just wouldn't know.
Yeah, you wouldn't have a set path that you're trying to follow. Like what I wound up doing, and what I've had a lot of success doing for leading people in the under part, the pollen, is instead of trying to take a direct route to any of the flowers on the right side, you pretty much try and run through the what am I looking for here? The trees. Like if you want to go to R1, the first one on the right when you're leaving the safe room, that one still has basically the exact same rotation for the dog, I think. And it's the only one that's the same as far as I can tell. But otherwise, like if I'm going to the rocks flower, the caves flower, I go through trees and then run straight across behind the dog or in front of the dog, depending on where it is, instead of just trying to walk through the safe room directly to it. And the same thing is true for R3. The same thing is true for R2. Like going through trees seems to be the best strategy, and you just got to know where the dogs are to get to trees safely from there. Because from trees you can get to L1, you can get to L2. L3 is a little bit of a it's a little bit harder, but you can get to it. You're already standing on top of trees, obviously. Caves is very easy to get to. R1 is easy to get to because you just go straight back to the safe room. And R3 isn't too bad to get to either, because there's only 2 dogs you really need to get behind, and one of them doesn't even go by the flower anymore on R3. So trees became a really, really, really good hub.
Yeah, I think something that more advanced players are starting to learn is that you shouldn't try and just like sit at a flower for a long time waiting for a beast to patrol away, and you should instead try to figure out a different route to it to get to it faster. A perfect example is on normal mode when mid left or L2 and close right R1 spawn at the very beginning. I feel like a lot of groups just go to R1 and just sit there and kill 30 seconds waiting for this dog to patrol away, where in reality you have excuse me, you have time to go to mid left, come back, and then hit R1. And as soon as you're hitting R1, that dog is patrolling away, or it's like making that turn so you can hit that flower. So you're getting 2 flowers in the time that it would normally take you 1. So I think for a lot of groups, figuring out those alternate routes and figuring out like, oh, we can, even if something's at R3, we don't have to go out the right side. We can go out the left side and make progress all the way towards the back and kind of go different directions. It doesn't always have to be one set direct path to that thing. You can play around with it a little bit more. And at least on normal mode, the dogs basically have no perception behind them at all. So you can really squeeze by really quickly with some of these normal mode rotations. Prestige mode does not feel nearly as forgiving. I don't know if you guys had the effect of maybe the dogs felt more perceptive from the front, or you had trouble with peeking. That was the only thing my team had difficulty with, just because we were so used to running normal, like with just, one of my clanmates, Merrick, who we call basically like, the safari leader. He knows that place so well that he basically doesn't need anyone up top because we've just memorized all the rotations. But this time around, people were peeking, people were looking around corners, and we were just getting messed up by it. So did you have that kind of vibe at all?
I didn't, but my suspicion is that the dogs have paths now that are actually walking them into where they will see corners if you peek them.
Fair enough.
Like before, the dogs didn't really walk to where they would even see a corner if you peeked it in a lot of cases, but now their paths are a little bit closer to the areas that you would peek out if you're trying to see something that you can't see from whatever you're behind. So I know that like a big example of that happening, which got us tier 3 times, was at the trees going towards the mid left flower, L2.
Yep.
The dogs walk right by that one. So if you peek out a little bit too early while the dog is still walking towards the L2 flower, it'll see you even though you're not really very clearly visible, because it's very close to where you're trying to peek from. And then the same thing is true going from the safe room to the trees. There's the dog going to L1. When it goes directly to the L1 flower, it can see you if you're hiding kind of like right around that corner. And there's the one that walks right next to the death pit, that like patrols back and forth there, and he's walking to make sure that if you like try to peek that corner, you'll get caught there too. So basically what I think what needs to be done until you know the encounter really well is either have the crystal holders tell you which ways the dogs are facing and kind of put it on them so you don't have to peek corners, and then just using the third person camera to look around the corner. Like, and if you can't use the third person corner or camera to look around the corner, don't check the corner because the dog might be looking.
I think they wanted to place a much higher reliance on the people above guiding the people down below, as opposed to the people down below just being able to like, okay, well, we know that dog's over there, so and we're good. So that aspect, if they were going for that, I enjoy that.
I definitely think it worked. I mean, I know the paths personally, and I feel like people will after doing it week after week after week. But on the first round, and I'm sure for a lot of teams, many rounds to follow, it just you can you benefit so much more from having a pair of eyes that's not in any danger of checking.
Yeah. So next up is the Gauntlet. Before we leave Beasts, I realized that there could be some pathing issues with the dogs. You know, there were definitely plenty of times where the dogs would like start to walk down their normal path, but then they would turn around early and come back and then go back the other way. I don't know if that's intended, where it's just trying to like fake you out or something like that, or maybe something does mess up in the game. I don't know. You know, Bungie hasn't commented on it or anything like that, so. They
do 100% mess up their pathing. If you kill a beast handler near a dog, they go nuts.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think it might be if they like kind of notice you sometimes, but it is a little tiny bit buggy. Not enough to mess up most runs, but
yeah. Like sometimes it works fine, and then sometimes, you know, certain dogs feel like a cat at 3 a.m, you know, where they just need to run around everywhere and it doesn't make any sense, but it just happens and you have to deal with it. Okay, so moving to Gauntlet, I'll let you go first this time. But in general, again, a lot of changes that probably most people were expecting. I don't know. Yeah, go.
I am so disappointed with the Gauntlet.
Really?
Not in the encounter as a whole, but the rotating plate strategy. I was a huge proponent of that, where you'll have like, I shoot top arrow, I stand on plate, you shoot bottom arrow, you kill scions. We rotate and move as a unit of 3 rather than as a group of 6 doing one thing together, so that you would have 2 smaller teams. And that works just as well if you're familiar with your team, because what you'll do is, since the Gauntlet no longer allows the same person to run twice, you'll have to have person 1 run, and then after they've run, they're like, I'm swapping roles with person 2. Person 2, what were you doing? And person 2's like, I was killing scions, shooting bottom arrow. And then they swap roles. The one person goes in, the other person comes out, and then they had to actually like think on the fly and really adapt to what the other person was doing. And it's not like that crazy hard to do, but you have to pick up quick if you're doing it. And that's not really true of the standing still play strat, which I like I said about the Bads encounter, I don't like standing still on plates. I feel like that is probably the wimpiest way they could use the core mechanics of Destiny, because it's really like the moving and going after enemies aggressively that makes the game lots of fun for me. And you can't even take advantage of cover-based mechanics standing on a plate either, so you can't like peek behind walls and that sort of thing. It just takes the fun out of the shooter elements and the movement elements, platforming, to stand on a plate. But in the Gauntlet encounter, it just makes much more sense now than ever before to stand on the plate still, because you just stand there on the plate and say, you know, on your plate you shoot top arrow, on the person to your left's plate you shoot bottom arrow, and you help the person on your left with their projection when it spawns. And that's all you have to do now, and just have people in the Gauntlet call out which symbol they're looking at. And it's obvious now that was the intended way for the encounter to be approached. I would almost venture to say that when they were developing it, they might not have even considered that people would try to rotate as they were playing it, and they might just try to stand on the plates at all times, because the fact that the Prestige mode is so much easier standing on static plates makes me think that they literally thought about rotating as a non-possibility. I think the Gauntlet feels probably the least changed, outside of the fact that you have to have people rotate into the Gauntlet. But I like the dialogue saying, has it proven themselves or has failed to impress, and then when you get the proven worthy debuff, if you actually go through the gauntlet and can no longer pick up the psionic charge, it all adds a lot in terms of difficulty in the coordination aspect of it. So it makes for a much more fun encounter than before, I think, because up until the very end, you never know if you're actually going to make it or not, and then it's just constant communication the whole time too, which is really nice. So I like the way that they changed it. It still feels like a short encounter. It's probably the easiest in terms of all the shooting that you have to do, but one of the hardest in terms of the communication, I'm sure, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot that I feel like they can do to expand on the platforminess of the encounter, because it's basically like, it's the platforming encounter, or, it's something like that. And I feel like they basically did as much as they possibly could do for that encounter without adding anything else to it. Obviously I think you and I would like, something where, we dunked everything in the middle, and now like the stage transforms and there's like a giant gladiator there, and oh crap, we have 1 minute to kill this something like that.
Yeah.
That would have been cool, but it was basically the most they could have done with the encounter without drastically changing anything. I'm actually kind of surprised at the fact that they didn't save the whole everyone has to run for the challenge mode.
Challenge mode, yeah.
Because everyone thought that's what the challenge mode was going to be. Is just, everybody's got to run, because it's just, that's what happened in the past. So I'm interested to see what the challenge mode ends up being for that encounter. And just to kind of reiterate on what you were saying about the rotation strategy, that's what my group uses as well. We do the two rotating around. And another one of my clanmates, Fitzy, did the standing still strat, and he was like, yeah, this is pretty nice in terms of like execution. And I have a feeling, I'll be trying to look into that strategy a little bit more. I did like the rotation much more as well. It feels more active, and it doesn't feel as boring as opposed to just like, sitting on my plate. All right. When are you coming around? Okay. Shoot. All right. And it's just, it's just kind of...
It's just not demanding at all.
Yeah, exactly. So that is probably the way that I imagine they wanted people to do it. And that is probably going to be the more popular prestige way of doing it, especially considering all the different things that you have to shoot now, and go get your scion, then you have to shoot the scion and this and that. The very end, I think, was actually made easier because there's only 3 now, so you can just split your groups 3 and 3, and that's it. And for example, we usually do rotation strategy, so it was like, okay, cup team, you're grabbing the first, third, and the last one, and then dog team, you're grabbing 2 and 4, and it was just done. And
yep, that's exactly how we did it too.
Yeah, so
even when there was 4 on normal mode.
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing 4 on normal, we had 2 people do one, 2 people do the other, and then 2 could just kind of grab whatever they wanted. Which, to be fair, we probably should have just been doing it the 3 and 3 strat anyway, because that just would have been easier to coordinate. But yeah, they basically did everything I think they could have for Gauntlet to maybe increase the difficulty beyond, maybe adding some walls that came down from the ceiling that you had to, dodge, or you had to run through a certain kind of path in a different way, or instead of just straight lines, they added, some barrier that you had to walk a set path to open up first, or something like that. Other creative ways of changing up the platforming thing. Yeah, I don't think anything else on Gauntlet. So we will move to the finale, Callus, where the only change, or it feels like the only significant change, was the fact that if you punch a scion, one of the shielded ones in the throne room, you get teleported into the mind's eye, and one person randomly from the mind's eye will get thrown into the throne room. And this is a nice blend of the VOG Vault of Glass Atheon teleport situation, where before they changed it, you could have the 3 furthest back people be the person, or be the people who got teleported inside for Atheon. And then they changed it so it was completely random, which I did not mind at all because, again, it sort of lends itself to prestige mode. Everyone's got to know how to do everything, and I like that. And this is a nice mix of both. You know, you can control who goes in, you can't control who goes out. And I think that's, 50-50, right down the middle. You can't get too much more fair than that. It's a nice little compromise. This fight is a doozy, or can feel like a doozy, even though I don't feel like it should be as difficult as it seems. We struggled here on our second run. Granted, our second run was like 3 Titans and 3 Hunters, so pretty far from an ideal group composition. But
yeah,
it was still much more difficult than I think it is maybe supposed to feel like it is. A lot of premature deaths, just people playing too aggressively, and pushing up past those plates closest to Callus, and just ending up dying and burning 2 reses. And so you need much more safer play in order to succeed. I think Raiden Strider is really going to be successful for a lot of groups who are struggling with handling the throne room. Otherwise, the Mind's Eye situation stayed the same for the most part. I did not have many I don't know about you. It felt like my group had a few problems dealing with getting teleported in like a bad spot. For me, even if I got launched over a ramp, the gravity felt heavier, so it would kind of suck me back down, and dodging things was not particularly difficult for me to do in the Mind's Eye when you got teleported in from all the way back, if you had to go all the way back down. Did you experience that at all, or is that just maybe kind of like a one-off, like people trying to get used to it?
I think that's definitely people trying to get used to it, because it spawns you in where you start at the very beginning every time. And there's that little runway that's actually just a flat stretch with no like lopsided tiles or holes in the ground or anything like that. So you should be able to gain your bearings as long as you, I guess, are at all familiar with the way that the tiles work in there. It takes a while to get used to it, so I totally understand people dying a few times before they get it. And I have had issues where like it's disorienting going in sometimes, because you'll kill the Scion to get teleported, and then it's like, he's teleporting in on the right, no, the left, maybe the middle, okay, left, he'll go in left, and like your character just stays wavy and blurry and messed up for the like 2 or 3 seconds straight, and it's just really confusing.
I never had one of those disorienting moments where like it placed me in backwards or sideways or anything like that. I was always pointed
forwards.
straight.
It always faces you forwards, but it can teleport you in really in one of 3 spots, like middle, right, or left. And
right.
Sometimes it just doesn't really know where it wants to place you, I guess, and it just places you and then places you somewhere else and then places you a third time maybe even, and it's disorienting. I've experienced it, and it shouldn't ruin a run, but it is disorienting. It is a little bit harder, I think, too, on the Mind's Eye, because you really always want to have 3 people in the Mind's Eye to kill the grounded Scions and the projections. But if you are doing the 3 and 3 strategy, which I'm not even really sure that's the best strategy anymore. I think that 4 and 2 has pretty much become meta. But 3 and 3, if you kill a Scion, you teleport someone out of the Mind's Eye. So there's 3 people in the Mind's Eye, 2 are at the barrier, and 1's way back, who knows where. Suddenly you've only got 2 people to actually kill the Scions, and you're almost doing a challenge run unintentionally, because you don't really want to have to put that much pressure on that few players in a normal run. So having 4 people in the Mind's Eye and 2 people stay out is better if you have, at least 2 people that are good enough to stay outside. Things like Devour and Supers help massively with that, because the first 3 enemies that spawn in the throne room, if you've cleared out everything before you get teleported in, which you really, really need to in Prestige mode, are flanks. And if you let those guys stay alive, then suddenly they'll put their shield up and protect Scions and Legionaries that are shooting at you, and then when more yellow bars spawn in, it's a problem. But you should be able to just keep 2 in the throne room for the most part, and try to kill all the ads with supers to keep everything under control. And if you can keep 4 people inside the Mind's Eye, then it's a lot easier to kill the skulls because the multiplier for the number that spawns is higher if you've only got 2 people inside the throne room. And you can get like 100 times buff instead of a like 80-ish at best. And that 100 times buff makes it so much easier to one-phase him. And the one thing that I think I don't really like about the way the Prestige Callus works is one-phasing him is just the obvious, easiest choice. Like, why would you even
You never don't want to one-phase him.
Yeah. It's almost, I'm sure in a lot of groups, it pretty much comes down to being a wipe if you don't one-phase him. I feel like he needs more health. I feel like he really does.
A health boost for him would be nice. I know my group one-cycled him on our first kill ever, and you usually get to a point where either you want to one-cycle him or you want to get him to about a third of a health bar or like right before it, because otherwise he does that big fire AoE. And dealing with that is incredibly annoying, especially even like on a 2-4 split. Super, super annoying to deal with. And yeah, there's never a time where you don't want to go for a one cycle. And if they did bump up his health, I would be okay with that to make you do it 2 times. Even though I feel like a lot of people...
A one cycle should be really hard. A one cycle should be worthy of a YouTube video rather than a one plate being a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Like that's... On Prestige mode, 1 plate is extreme. Like that should be absolutely absurd to accomplish, but it was accomplished like within a day or maybe even 2 of Callus being released.
Yeah, I feel like bosses rarely get their health adjusted for prestige modes or hard modes or challenge modes or anything like that. Has that ever really happened in previous raids?
I don't think it has either. Be a very appropriate change.
Yeah,
because like one of the hardest things one of the biggest things you can do. So Dark Souls, which is my favorite game series ever, every time you complete the game, you go into a new cycle of the game called NG+, and what that does is it makes enemies do more damage and have more health. And towards the later NG cycles, if you beat the game 6 or 7 times, which I mean most people obviously aren't going to bother with that, but if you do, you're pretty darn good at dodging the bosses at that point. So the fact that they do increase damage isn't really that big of a deal unless they're going to be one-shotting you. And the thing that makes it really hard is not so much that they do more damage as that you have to avoid their attacks for a really long time. So if they have like from NG to NG plus 7 almost 3 times as much health, you really have to be on point the entire time, because in a lot of cases, like what goes on with Callus, there'll be like a first phase to the boss that's not that bad, and then the second phase is really hard, and on NG you just burst through it really quick, because when it's doing the transformation to second phase, like staggering Callus, you just get a bunch of free damage in, so you only have to deal with second phase for a little bit of health, and it's not that bad. But the higher NGs you get, suddenly you actually have to learn how to deal with that part of the encounter, and the same thing would be nice to see applied in Destiny, where it's like you can only realistically, like if you got 100 stack of skulls, you burn off a third of his health. So more often than not, teams are going to have to learn how to deal with the fire attack and that kind of thing. And I understand why they don't do that, I guess, because I'm sure plenty of people are already upset that Prestige rate is as hard as it is. But
no, I was just going to say, I thought you were going to go, I'm sure people are typing in the comments that adding more health to a boss is not always a good idea because it's just artificial difficulty. Yeah. And
it is, in a sense.
Yeah.
But I'd still like to see it. I think that as much as it is artificial difficulty on some level, if you have a boss with phases, it is not artificial difficulty to make you have to deal with those phases. Like, if you just have to fight the boss for a really long time, and that's what makes it hard, that's one thing. But if you're used to not even having to deal with the solar attack that puts the entire ground on fire, if you're used to not having to worry about the cannon and like where he's aimed it, like that's a problem. But more importantly, the issue there is not so much that I want Callus to have a lot of health and I want him to be a really long fight. It's that I don't want him to be easily one-phaseable. I feel like he should require, in general, at least 2 phases. I don't think one-phasing should be so easy that it's the go-to strategy. I think 2-phasing should be the go-to strategy, and 3-phasing should be more realistic for most teams. But it's just the known strategy is developed quick enough that, you know, you give 4 people inside the mind's eye and you make sure to take off his shield at the last moment. And I like the fact that you build your buff up. I like the fact that you feel like you can do a lot of damage to him, but I would rather if we had a situation where you had to usually 3-phase him, or if like a really good run happened, 2-phase him. I'd by far prefer that.
Yeah, I think people do enjoy being able to min-max those moments as a way of showing their prowess in the raid, right? Like being able to do that 2-4 split, being able to get 100 skulls, and being able to know the exact timing of which you can take off Callus's shield. Those are all things that I feel like a bunch of people do very much enjoy, because it makes them feel like they're getting much better at the encounter. It makes them feel like they're truly, truly mastering it. I also get what you're saying, though, is like that you have maybe a certain desire for certain encounters to be a certain way. But something that caught my memory when you were talking about mechanics just not being known. I remember during Skolas, way back in House of Wolves, people thought that the strategy was just to burst him down in a minute back when you actually could, and that the mechanics were a punishment for not doing so. And that was never the case. Like, the mechanics are there to give you something interesting to do and to provide a challenge while you're actually fighting the boss. And so what you were saying of just, not knowing how to deal with, the fire AoE, or not knowing how to deal with some of these phases, that just kind of rung a bell with me with Skolas, and some people saying like, oh, well, if you don't kill him in a minute, then you have to deal with the punishment of not killing him in a minute by dealing with the fight on how it's actually designed. And
did you know
just never made sense.
Did you know
to
that
me.
Callus has rotating adds, the yellow bars?
Yeah, the shields, the shields first of all are different, and then I believe the longer you take, you'll eventually get the Colossus to spawn as well. Don't they rotate
I mean, on a week-to-week basis?
Oh, yeah.
His first phase will be Incendiors, and then next week it's Legionaries, and next week it's Colossuses, and then in each third of his health, you have to deal with a different type of ad.
Right, and then also a rotating shield as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's cool. Did you have something that you wanted to say on that, or just
I think
cool?
We should know that. I think we should have to deal with that. I don't think you should
fair
get
enough.
through any fight and be like, it's Colossuses this week and we won phase, or it's Incendiors this week and we won phase.
So basically, like dealing with phase changes should be a more impactful thing in Destiny compared to how it is right now, whereas, phases of a fight feel more just like, okay, we reached a certain health point, so now this thing's going to happen instead of this, but we don't have to change anything. You want more impactful phase changes, and if that is what you're saying,
that definitely. And I mean, I would like if Callus literally was able to do two things at once. Like if he's lifting his hand to create a solar flare while also getting ready to fire his cannon at the same time.
Yeah.
Or if he creates the firestorm and there's like a solar flare chasing someone at the same time, like combining his attacks. But really, at the end of the day, the main thing that I want to see is he should not have enough health to where we can easily kill him using just one full clip of heavy each in a rallying barricade. Because the thing, like, we've got rallying barricades. We're going to use rallying barricades.
Yeah.
We've got empowering rifts. We're going to use empowering rifts. Like, it's no longer a matter of keeping your super available and where the War Priest... How many people really one-cycled the War Priest that weren't really good at it? But with Callus, it's
the
known
strategy.
Meta strats to one-phase him. And that is... That's... It feels like just kind of wasted effort in terms of making the boss fight, to where you've got like rotating enemies with rotating shields with different attacks and that sort of stuff, but you just never even really have to engage with it because you kill him so fast. I would not like for them to go back to King's Fall strats where you got Oryx and it takes 4 phases necessarily.
Yeah.
I want good teams to be able to do a ton of damage, but I feel like one phasing him should be like the pinnacle of DPS, and 2 phasing him should be a good run, and 3 phasing should be expected, rather than 1 phase is expected and 1 plating is good.
Yeah.
But like you like half a plate is the pinnacle of DPS right now. You see people freaking get on the plate and melt him instantly, and it's just like
they just stare at him and it's like, oh, he's dead. Yeah. No, I definitely would like more impactful phase changes as well, but unfortunately I feel like the reason why we don't really see that is because of, the raid formula, where you do a thing, to get rid of a boss's shield over time, and then the boss's shield goes down, and you got X amount of time to damage him, and then you rinse, repeat the whole thing. For like more impactful phase changes to happen, it would either need to be like a timing thing, or it need to be like a health thing. But with a health thing, you can easily just skip past phases unless they artificially block you from progressing with immunity shields, right?
And that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I feel like people wouldn't like that because it feels...
I don't like immunity.
Like it doesn't respect your skill or your prowess at the encounter.
Yeah.
So it is a very difficult problem to solve with regards to making impactful phase changes, at least the way, we're kind of thinking about it.
What would be kind of cool? Okay.
Go for it.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So what would you like to see? What if you could change the encounters? Just, I don't know if you've thought about it or if you have anything on the top of your head. What would you do to each of the encounters to make them different?
To make them different?
If you could completely reimagine them if you want to.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's a whole nother video, if anything.
It could be, that's for sure.
Well, I feel like you're asking me this question because you have some of your own ideas. Do you have some of your own ideas?
That is true, but okay. I would love to hear yours if you have any. I could certainly give you something to start with.
Yeah, go for it.
So, the gauntlet, I think one change that I would have loved to have seen would be the entire outer wall rotating. So, you have sun, and as people are rotating inside the gauntlet, the sun hoops that they have to jump through are like coming towards them. So while they're running clockwise, the entire ring is spinning counterclockwise, and you have to shoot the correct arrows from whatever plate. So maybe you're standing on the sun plate to activate it, but someone on a different plate entirely is the only one that can actually see sun, and it would make it harder to shoot and harder to coordinate, and that would be like a huge difficulty increase for prestigious mode by just making one thing rotate. I would have loved to have seen that.
That's pretty cool.
I think that having to collect the 9 vials in the baths would have been cool. Like if you pull like when you stand on the plate, the chain goes down. I think that should give you a vial, and you actually just get the damage phase after some certain amount of time. If you do some other activity, like if you kill 10 bathers, that's what causes the damage phase to start. But you have to actually hang the vials in the main room so that they're vulnerable to the force of will buff. And you're just trying to pull the chain down as many times as possible. And the problem of the encounter isn't so much just standing still and shooting the plate, but actually getting the vials there in the first place so that you can kill them.
Yeah.
I would like to see something like that. I feel like Callus should have worked like the Templar, where he teleports around the room and gets different angles, because he winds up being mostly a non-threat, and you wind up standing at just the, entrance of the room the entire time. But if they made it where he actually can teleport essentially to above the main doorway and just stand there and fires down from there, then you'll have to approach the entire room's areas that are considered safe differently. And I think that would really fit with his whole, like, I'm a psychic badass that can teleport you to the mind's eye by just clapping my hands, that kind of thing. It would really reinforce that. I'm sure I could probably go on. Those last 3 were kind of off the top of my head, but
yeah.
I want to see like really creative changes to Prestige mode, I guess.
Yeah, it's something that I haven't given a whole lot of thought. For me, it's always been like the gauntlet, I feel like should be more, you can have the platforming section, but then you also have like the big gladiator battle, right? That's always something that I've been talking about. I was
hoping
with
for the gladiator.
Is just having the gladiator battle at the end. Like the outer ring of the room like goes away, like it comes down, but then in its place comes like a huge crowd of cabal, like all cheering and yelling, and then other things are rotating down, and you have a big gladiator battle. Something along those lines is something I've would have loved to see. For the beast encounter, instead of you hunting the beasts are hunting you, and you have to do something a little bit differently with that, where like maybe the beast has to follow you around, or you're trying to avoid it as much as possible in like that, as opposed to just the beast, patrolling back
Leading
and forth.
Leading it around would be kind of cool, like maybe convincing it, like let's say there's a handler, a yellow bar handler that you need to kill to win the encounter.
Yeah.
And you have to get the scent of the pollen onto the handler to make the beast attack it.
I've basically been equating it to evolve. Like, what if that encounter was just like a game of Evolve? Anyone remember Evolve? You guys remember Evolve?
Nope.
You don't remember? Have you ever seen Evolve?
Was that the game where you like? Was it like the one player is the boss and everybody else is fighting the boss?
Yeah. It's so one person was the monster, and then four people were trying to fight the monster, and the monster had to like level up and grow as strong as possible and kill their escape routes. And then the four dudes had to go kill the monster before that could happen. And I think something along those lines would have been really cool to see. Like you have like one or two people who are the designated, like taunters, and they try and bait it into a trap. And then that's when you can do some damage or something like that. And just have like a massive arena and jungle and something along those lines. And then you could have 3 different beasts that it could be on any given week, and they, a couple of them do different things, or maybe you have to trap them a certain way. Maybe you only have one person taunting because it just doesn't take that much aggravation to get them, but you need 3 trappers because they're really powerful, or something like that. Obviously, I have not thought that out too much, but I think something along those lines would be pretty cool for the beast encounter. Make it. I
would love to see those
about a big beast.
The beast is it's fun as it is, and I'm not saying any of the raid encounters aren't fun as they are, because I enjoy the raid for sure.
Yeah, same.
But the it does remind me a little bit of Vault of Glass in the sense like the Gorgon's Labyrinth, you avoided the Gorgons and then walked to the end, and in this encounter you avoid the dogs and kill them. So it's not like it's not to say that they're the same, because I think this is like a refined Vault of Glass in that sense, but it is still a little bit simplistic, and I would like to see it get a little bit less so. And then Callus, like you said, he follows the raid formula, and I would like to see some changes where maybe they don't. Like a thought that I had when you were talking about the gauntlet, like the walls coming down and there's Cabal cheering you on in the middle or something. I mean, first of all, the idea of the Cabal cheering me on,
or sorry, they'd be like cheering on the Gladiator, because it's like Callus would have like, you have cleared the gauntlet, but now it is time for one more challenge, and then like the stage transforms and like huge Cabal Gladiator comes up, and then the stands come up and all the Cabal are like cheering for the Gladiator, and then you kill the Gladiator and they just like all start booing or whatever, or something like
awesome. That's such a cool idea. And also just to tag on a thought, the fact that Callus narrates at all, I would love if he did it more in the middle of encounters too. Like even if he could even tell you what you need to do, like telling you what dog you need to kill first or something like that in the beast encounter or something to that effect. But at any rate, having him narrate at all, that's super cool. I'm glad they introduced that. I was playing a little bit of the Overwatch Halloween PvE event recently, and just having a narrator constantly talking about things that's going on, it adds so much just like immersion and engagement to the fights. And the fact that they actually gave us a raid boss that talks that is so much nicer. I loved actually beating Callus and having him stop for a moment and be like, if you seek the means to true potential, seek me out. Like that kind of thing. Yeah. That was,
it gives him a sense
absolutely badass.
It gives him a sense of like personality and meaning. You know, you have these other bosses like Atheon. Like Atheon never said anything. We don't know anything about Atheon. Like we barely knew anything about Crota. And Oryx, we got some context.
Oryx was all right.
Axis, like, what are we getting from Axis? Axis is not talk. He said, he does a bunch of fallen grunting noises. So
yeah, and it's a shame too, because like all of those bosses would probably be really fun to learn about. I mean, like Callus, I'm not 100% sure if we can trust him or not in terms of like, do we want to go to reach our true potential? Like, is he on our side, or does he want to kill us? Is he just amused by us, or does he want us as allies, right? Like the fact that he talks to us actually for the like really maybe the only time ever in Destiny so far has given me a little semblance of some story that's not kind of straightforward. Like it raises interesting questions that I want to see how they address.
Yeah. I completely 100% agree. I hope it is something that they pursue a little bit more. Just to even get away from the raid for a little bit, I hope more long form storytelling is a direction that they do end up going. I'm personally getting kind of exhausted by these just very brief
agreed.
Story situations that happen. It never feels like I'm experiencing the story of Destiny. It feels like I'm experiencing stories that are happening in Destiny. You know, I want something that's going to keep me interested in the long haul. That's what I kind of thought Gaul was going to be for the entirety of Destiny 2. Like, this is going to be
all the way up until he turns into the
year
giant spectral winged monster where you're like, oh, he's not dead. Sweet.
Yeah. And then just I was expecting it to be like, this is Bungie's chance to like finally get a more long-term investment in the story and have it go for much longer and have us stay invested in the story. And then it ends and you're like, oh, okay. And that's kind of what happened with House of Wolves and Dark Below, is these very, very brief little stories about other things that happen to be happening at the same time. And it's okay, but you know, you can only tease mystery for so long before it just exhausts me and I'm out. You know, that's what it's been so far is 3 years of teasing and tease and like, okay, yeah, and now we're gonna get some answers.
I'm just glad to have the tease
next
in the
time.
game, personally. Like the fact that there, I mean, first of all, I agree with what you're saying. Like, there's way too much of the
there's too much
the good guys
mystery.
win in a short little battle, basically, and having Callus actually give us the question as to, I mean, he kind of poses to us like, are we even the good guys to some extent? And having that question even asked is pretty cool. But the longer form storytelling and not having the answer, that's what I like. Like, I'm glad we don't know where Callus really stands. We don't know how powerful Callus really is. We don't really know what forces he aligns himself with. Like, he did try to kill us for his amusement. There is no doubt that he's
well, it was a test. It was a trial.
Yeah, it's a trial, a dangerous trial. But I mean, we had our light at that point. Maybe he knows he can't kill us anyway. Like, who knows? But at any rate, I definitely like the fact that they took the raid and then injected some narrative into it, because it made it a lot better. And I would love to see even more of that.
I agree, as long as they follow up on it. I don't want to have an experience where like 5 years later we're talking about like, man, you remember Callus? And he was like talking about like this, you know, maybe he's our friend, maybe he's not, like maybe he has more power or something like that. And it's like, whatever happened with that? And then the answer's like, there's never did anything. I don't want that to happen. I really don't. I agree. So as long as they follow up, I'm on board. Totally on board.
I guess I kind of agree. Now that I think about it, because I would rather have them do what they did with Callus and never address it, than have Callus be like, I'm the big bad guy, and then when you kill him, and it's like, okay, it's done.
Yeah, it's just over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can only hope. You know, it's definitely not something that's going to be explored in probably DLC 1 or DLC 2 at all. Maybe the Taken Queen, aka what I'm calling the September expansion. We don't know anything about it yet, but I'm just calling it Taken Queen because of Savathûn being all over the place, and that's just my guess for where we're going. With
thinking Savathûn's, I certainly hope they don't go that Year 2 Destiny 2 is the Taken expansion.
I think she's in there so much that I feel like it's an inevitability that
it's got to be. Please be an earlier expansion. Oh man, please don't make it the Taken Queen.
For me, it just feels something like it's going to be inevitable. If you don't know, by the way, who Savathûn is, it's related to the Crota and Oryx storyline. Savathûn was it Oryx's sister? Or
that's right.
Yeah, Oryx's sister. So that's kind of what I'm talking about with the Taken Queen and all that. Again, it's just a guess and just joking.
It seems reasonable enough. I mean,
yeah,
we had the whole Savathûn song strike, and the whole point of it is that we're trying to kill the Song of Savathûn, the giant shrieker that's being used to peer into our dimension. So
yeah,
it's a storm of brewing. That's for sure.
There's potential there. Anything else you want to mention about the raid specifically?
We should probably discuss the loot, right?
Yes, that is the next topic. Regular loot and prestige loot. Not a lot of people happy about prestige mode loot, in that it is the same, basically the same armor set, except it has a different color scheme. It's glowy. It's sort of ornament style, like like Wrath of the Machine and all the stuff from Age of Triumph, which Age of Triumph, if you don't know, was the last update to Destiny 1, where they brought all the raids up to 390, which 400 light at the time was the cap, and they revamped all of the armor sets and gave them cool ornaments, which are basically like gun ornaments, except they had like special effects on them, glow, and maybe you'd be animated a little bit more. And so it's along that kind of vibe, but not exactly. And I haven't gotten any guns. I haven't seen many guns, if any, out of the prestige mode. So in a way, I'm kind of okay with that, because like a lot of people just really want armor, as shown with Iron Banner. People like the look of armor, and I'm not saying the armor looks bad, because it looks amazing. The art is probably the thing that needs the least amount of concern in this game. The artists are fantastic, but apparently an emblem, an aura, and a revamped armor set is not enough for the masses. We are so used to having the hard mode increase our light and make us more powerful, and we do not have that. So how do you feel about that? Because I can talk after you, because I have a couple points.
I feel absolutely terrible about that. I feel like that was a huge mistake. Like, I couldn't fathom a way it could be a bigger mistake, to be perfectly honest. Like, the Prestige, first of all, the emblem that you get from completing the Prestige raid is a rare emblem. A rare blue quality emblem. I saw that come out of the chest after killing Callus, the biggest, baddest ass boss in Destiny 2, on the hardest difficulty, and out of this little dinky chest, by the way, pops out this little tiny blue pyramid, and I'm like, what is that? And I pick it up expecting like a token or something, and it's a blue quality emblem, and I'm just like, what the actual...
I know it doesn't matter.
Actually just do that?
I know it doesn't matter at all, but it's still just funny. It's like, really? It's not even a legendary?
An exotic emblem is still just an emblem too.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really make a difference, but the fact that they like made it blue quality was just I was blown away. And then I go to the tower to turn in my Acris quest that I've finished after weeks of waiting, because you do the first quest, and then they had the bug where you were only getting one Emperor seal per each encounter when you were supposed to get like 8 to 12.
Yep.
So it's supposed to take 2 raids, and it took 13. And then we wait week after week, and then they delay the Prestige raid, so you have to wait another week. And then it's like, okay, we're finally gonna get our final upgrade to the Legend of Acris. It started out with no perks. We finished the first part, got some good perks on it. It's got 2 in the magazine. We're gonna finish this last part. It's gonna have 4 in the magazine. Maybe have a couple more in reserve. It's going to be a really good shotgun. And then I go talk to Benedict, and he's like, here's your ornament. And I'm like, what? No.
Yeah.
No, you're kidding. Please, no.
But in a way, it matches exactly with how the Prestige raid is to an extent, right? It's a cosmetic upgrade. It's not a power upgrade. I'll talk about that. Keep going. I'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay, so I've gotten the emblem and the ornament, and both of those things were just massive disappointments to me. And then they announced that the challenge mode raid is going to give you guaranteed drops for the gear, which I will admit the gear looks pretty cool, but the normal mode gear also looks pretty cool. Like, yep. I liked the normal mode gear too, and the prestige mode gear is not really an improvement per se. It's different. It's just as good, but it's not an improvement. So getting the prestige mode raid gear, if like you got the full set, you'd really stand out, and you would be like an elite player. But Destiny's done this thing since forever, where it really only matches you with people that are like kind of in the same skill bracket as you anyway. So like if I go to the tower, which is one of the only places I can even show off my gear in the first place, I've got this really difficult to get gear set, and it's just like there's no one to even show off to really, because most of the people in the tower, like if the tower's got 14 people in it, 5 of those are my clanmates who have also got the gear. So I don't really, I don't get to feel all that special. And then like oftentimes when I'm running around the tower, I see other people in high level gear too. So it's like, it's hard to show off when most of the time I'm kind of in groups of people that have similar accomplishment. But that's neither here nor there, because the fact that you get purely cosmetic loot on its own, it's a problem to me, because I want to get better gear as I progress. Okay, I'll just go ahead and cut out the majority of this, because this is all about the in game. and the end game as a whole needs a million different changes in my opinion. I feel like they've really dropped the ball on it, and it needs to be completely reevaluated. In my opinion,
by the way, I will link
stuff that does.
I will link Slayer's video where he talks about a very popular Reddit post he made about his thoughts on the endgame situation. You can find that in the description of this.
Thank you, Datto.
No
I might actually do another one of those too, because there are other things that need to be addressed.
Yep.
But actually, I can address one of them right now.
Go
So
for
the gear that you get from the raid, I don't like the fact that it's purely cosmetic, but the fact that the whole endgame is purely cosmetic, so this really just falls into the same overarching issue of the endgame being kind of messed up in that respect. But I would be able to tolerate getting purely cosmetic loot from the raid if it was really, really cool. Like, if it was a distinct night and day difference improvement from the normal mode.
That was going to be one of my
like
questions,
it's a reskin.
Was if the armor set was a different model set, would that matter?
That would matter.
Okay.
That would make a difference. If it was not just like mostly a reskin, I think I could tolerate getting the Prestige raid gear because it would feel totally different. But right now, if I get the Prestige raid set and apply the normal raid shader, it looks almost identical.
Yeah.
There's just like the neon glowy parts to it. But what's horrible about the raid set being purely cosmetic is like Titans and Hunters are just getting shafted. Because Warlock's raid gear gives them 10 recovery, which is nice. But Titan raid gear, I'm pretty sure, gives you 0.
I would have to go check.
You can buff it to 4 by putting all 4 nodes to recovery.
Let me see. I have, let's see here. I have the gloves, which have recovery.
They all should have the perk on it, I think, to give them restoration.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
I think my, here, I can just equip it right now in Destiny Item Manager. Shout out. That's the wrong button.
Very good.
Here we go. Raid armor. Equip it. Put it on. Why is it not updating? Let's refresh. Hang on. Stalling for time. 4 recovery is what I have with my Titan raid armor set.
And you probably got all recovery nodes selected, I would assume.
1 recovery, 2 recovery, 3 recovery, 4 recovery nodes selected.
Yeah. So if you get the Titan armor and you don't even change the nodes, you'll have 0 recovery. Literally 0 recovery. You've beaten the hardest content in the game, got the most prestigious gear set in the game, and you are actively weaker for wearing it than if you just wore some legendary armor that has better recovery. And then Hunters get shafted in the exact same way. Like, you can't even choose to wear the raid gear without actively crippling yourself.
Yeah.
And that is just...
It is a problem with the raid gear. It is a problem with the raid gear, but it is also a problem with the stats, the stats themselves. Right?
Yeah.
It's with mobility and resilience feeling like they have 0 impact on your gameplay. Go watch that video after you finish watching this. It's the feeling that they don't do anything for you, and that recovery is actually noticeable in moment-to-moment gameplay. So it's 2 issues for sure, but I still, it doesn't change the fact that I agree that it sucks that I can roll with 9 recovery on my Iron Banner set, including a mod, and with my raid set, I only get 4 recovery, and that's with me switching every single thing to recovery. So that is unfortunate.
I mean, the Vaults of Glass got hard mode gear correct, as far as I'm concerned. Like, getting the Mythoclast, which was, at the time, just insane. An absolute ridiculous weapon before they toned it down in the Crucible, and then it was still really good. I mean, honestly, I think they never should have toned that weapon down in PvE, because it was one of the most fun guns in the game, and it really in Destiny 1 and in Destiny 2, for that matter. If you don't make a primary weapon or a kinetic or energy in Destiny 2 really, really strong, it doesn't really feel like it's worth using it as your exotic outside of, like, it doesn't feel worth using. It is worth using. Like, Cold Heart's good for DPS, but it's not like in the moment-to-moment gameplay of Cold Heart, it feels like a strong gun, whereas the Mythoclast did.
Yeah.
But, like, Fatebringer being exclusive to that, what were the other guns that were exclusive to heroic mode? I'm drawing a blank here.
Oh boy, wasn't Vision of Confluence. Praetor's Timepiece at the time was, but we didn't. The community didn't really come on to the super high rate of fire pulse rifles until much later. So at the time, everyone kind of thought it was just kind of junk.
Yeah, even though it was a good weapon.
Even though it was a good weapon the entire time. I'm trying to think.
I guess really the moral of the story isn't so much that like, I don't know which Vaults of Glass gear was heroic and which was normal outside of Fatebringer, to be honest.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that all of the gear from Vaults of Glass was very good. And that's something they really did not do with the raid in general. Like, normal mode or heroic mode loot, like, the normal mode loot might as well be cosmetic because most of it's not really much of an improvement, if an improvement at all, from other gear you can get in the game. Like, Midnight Coup, is it really better than the Iron Banner hand cannon, which is, I mean, I use old-fashioned almost nonstop. It's probably the most reliable hand cannon for what I do in the game, and I've only used Midnight Coup in like one specific select instance where it turns out Rampage is actually good, but the vast majority of the time it's kind of useless. Whereas Fatebringer, I equipped that and I was like, hell yeah, let's use this all the time. And I understand they need to address power creep, but addressing power creep and crucible balance before even considering making really exciting high-end loot come from the most difficult content in the game, like, I feel like they really should really encourage you to do the hardest content in the game, because when you beat Callus, it's an accomplishment, and it would be nice to get a meaningful trophy that respects the level of dedication required to beat it.
Yeah, including something along the lines of power, because as it's kind of felt like the raid weapons are never going to be above and beyond more powerful than other things in terms of light level because of the way things are handled right now. And I feel like a lot of it's done for the sake of balance. Would it be nice to have like 310 raid items so at least those have a little bit more power? Sure, but it is basically our design philosophy versus Bungie's design philosophy of how they want to handle their game. And we are looking for one thing and Bungie's looking for another thing.
I gotta say, just the sheer amount of comments that I've seen everywhere, and like, I don't like to say it because it feels like it's just kind of I've got a horse in the race, but watching the Twitch directory for Destiny fall off, I think that their design philosophy, if they really want to stick to it, all they're doing by committing to making the guns balanced is just committing to a mistake. Like having the Galahorns, Icebreakers, Last Words, Fatebringers, Black Hammers, those things to chase, that's an important part of the looter-shooter experience, and if they take that out, it hurts way, way, way more than I think they're seeing. And
people want that holy grail. They want that holy grail. You know, I understand that maybe Bungie wants the exotics to, you know, feel like a toy that you can play with and, you know, give them out to everyone, and all that's fine. But you got to give out some holy grail items, you know. If that means you got to make a tier above exotic, go for it, you know. Borderlands, Pearlescent, whatever. You need to have more of those holy grail items for people to chase to keep that kind of interest. And I know we're getting slightly off topic here, but I think, you know, this whole make sure everyone leaves happy situation with how they're handling Destiny 2, or feels like how they're handling Destiny 2, is it is a gamble. It's definitely going to be a gamble for them, because if what I feel like they're going for, and I remember reading like some sort of an interview, it could have been from like a pretty long time ago. I don't remember when, but I just remember seeing it quoted on Reddit recently, about players leaving happy. If players leave happy, Bungie thinks that they will be more inclined to return. And by leave happy, I assume they mean either truly leave happy or leave with the sense of that they have completed the game, if they've gotten everything that they wanted out of the game. And if they have that feeling, that they will come back to the game when there's newer things to do or when there's a new DLC to buy. If that pays off, and you do have these massive amounts of people returning and buying the DLC, I don't think we're going to see any changes in terms of what hardcore players are looking for, or veteran players are looking for, or people who want to make this their game are looking for. If those people do not come back in droves, then I think that's maybe when Bungie will start drifting more towards a game that is being made for the people who continue to play, as opposed to the people who end up playing for a little bit and then leave and then come back. Not that they don't make the game for people who are continuing to play. I know they absolutely do that, and there's plenty of things that kind of show that they're doing that. Age of Triumph is a great example, although I don't want to wait 2.5 years for something like that to come around. But yeah, it's for them. I think they are taking basically a big gamble on how they structured Destiny 2 and hoping that those players will return to that they got enough fun out of the game that they will want to return, as opposed to the feeling of, I did everything and I get it, so I'm just not going to come back. That's a big gamble that I think they're trying to take.
I agree it is a big gamble, and I think it also if it does pay off financially for them, which, I mean, they're a business, they need to do what is financially responsible. If it does pay off, then that is all fine and well for them. But at the end of the day, I do think that will result in a massive demographic shift in terms of who plays the game.
Absolutely.
And I think it would be you could look at it however you want, but it would be a hit, in my opinion, to the community, like a really big one, because I can't see it sounds horrible, but I can't see myself continuing to really be invested in the experience if it stays the way it is now. Like if it is like a one and done, there's weapons that don't really stand out, because if there were, it would make the experience less satisfying for people who didn't get them. If they don't want things like randomized rolls to where god rolls or something you can progressively work towards through reforging or something to that effect, like that isn't a needed system necessarily, but it's something to do for a hardcore player.
Yep.
If they don't have like factions that rank up progressively, if they don't have the Age of Triumphs book for you to complete, if they don't have the Grimoire for you to do, if they don't have the ghosts for you to collect, like if they don't have things for me to do, then at some point, I think that me and players like me will have to make the decision to not invest ourselves to anywhere near the same extent,
or even just like,
and that would be unfortunate.
The illusion of grind, right? It's not even like we have the illusion of grind anymore, like how random weapon rolls were. I still, for me, I still feel like that is an illusion of grind. But an illusion of grind is better than not really having one at all. And to be honest, I think that if the weapon roll illusion of grind was replaced with something equal that kept people invested as it did with the random weapon roll grind, I don't think many people would be complaining, or as many people would be complaining about the random weapon roll grind being gone, because there are definitely merits to having fixed rolls in the game. I don't think it's a completely horrifically awful thing that we have fixed rolls, but it's partly the fact that nothing really replaced that experience.
It's like the token system, where the token system isn't bad.
It's not bad.
It does a better job than reputation. I like being able to put my reputation on whatever character I want, but it should have been supplemental. And the fact that it is the only way to get gear from, say, Iron Banner, and it is tagged onto the raid, which, makes an equivalence between completing a raid encounter and doing a public event where you kill, War Beast in the EDZ. It puts those things on the same level because you get a token from both, and that's bad.
Yeah.
But it's not the token system's fault that it does that. It's just misuse of the system. And then the same thing is true kind of with random roll, or the removal of random rolls, where we don't necessarily need random rolls, but what we need is a way to progressively increase the strength of our weapons. And I have a lot of reasons that I think randomness would be the best way to do that, but that's neither here nor there. I think the whole reason that this all relates back to the Prestige raid is that the fact that they made the loot for the Prestige raid cosmetic really just shows in very clear ways the design philosophy behind in-game content right now. And that overall is, I guess, what I'm commenting on, even though it has gotten a bit off topic. Oops.
That's fine. I have one more thing I want to talk about with Prestige loot and just cosmetic versus power, but keep going.
Oh, no, that was the end of the comment. That was it for that one.
I see, for me, I've been a very huge proponent of more cosmetic-based end-game rewards. For quite a while now, is maybe I don't need to get the power increase, but I at least want to look more badass than everybody else if I'm doing really hard stuff. And I feel like the Prestige raid, in a way, does that. That they don't maybe do it the best by just using the same armor set and changing the color scheme and adding a couple of purple lights to it. But in a way, it does fulfill something that I was looking for. It was that, okay, if you're not going to make the end game about power, it needs to be about making me look like a badass in some way, giving me a cool emblem to chase, giving me a cool armor set to chase, or ornaments to look after, something like that. And I thought that would be much more, or at least somewhat appealing to the hardcore or veteran community of Destiny, is that, you know, at least you can go look like a badass by doing all this hard stuff. And I'll admit, I guess I was either surprised or I was wrong about what I thought those kind of players were looking for with their end game experience in terms of getting loot. You know, maybe if the armor set was different,
I think that
more
would make
people
a
would be
big
on,
difference. I think it's just how cool the cosmetics are.
Yeah. And I think people are kind of experiencing a little bit of burnout with bright engrams containing the most cool things. One thing that comes to mind was I was at the presentation at TwitchCon when they talked about seasons, which, by the way, I will have a video about later. But they showed a ship that had the raid ship shader on it. And I was like, there's no raid ship. At least right now. Maybe there's one for completing all the challenge modes or something like that. There's no raid sparrow. There's no raid sparrow. But there's certainly a lot of cool looking sparrows in that Eververse store now, aren't there? So, you know, is it if we don't get a raid ship after all of this, is it possible that the raid ship was moved into the Eververse store? I certainly think so. You know, that we used to have it, now we don't, and we see how much more effort they're putting into the Eververse store and in it providing all of these cool looking things. And man, would I love for some of those Eververse items to become items that you can just earn by doing hard activities. I get that you can earn bright engrams, you know, somewhat easily, but everything out of it is completely random. So you could buy $100 worth of bright engrams and still not get what you want. I mean, the odds are low, but you know what I'm trying to say.
The problem there too is just the fact that you can buy it in general. I mean,
right.
The coolest loot really, like, you should get some kind of shipper sparrow from finding all the region chests, from doing all the lost sectors, from completing all the strike night, or like all the nightfalls or something like that at least once. As in each of the 6 nightfalls in some variation or other, but
yeah,
like all of it's kind of been transferred into the Eververse. I was actually on Destiny Community Podcast recently, and they were talking about how the raid doesn't have a shipper sparrow, and I like, my first thought was like, of course it doesn't, because the only way to get those, the only way you get ships and sparrows right now is through Eververse, which, I mean, in theory, I don't dislike Eververse that much, but because they've made everything so cosmetic, the fact that the Eververse has the best cosmetics makes it where the best in-game content is what you spend money on, and that's kind of that's a big letdown.
Yeah.
I also think that what you were saying about the raid, as far as getting cosmetic loot from it, I think that would be enough. I really do think that would be enough, but they would have to figure out a very good reward structure for it, where it was something like okay, so this is off the top of my head. It's obviously not perfect.
Okay.
You get the hard, or the prestigious armor set that looks vastly different from the normal set. That is an absolute must-have tenet for how this is going to, that would create a meaningful reward. And then in repeated completions, you get a material like legendary shards or ascendant shards or radiant shards or whatever it is. Like, essentially, for those who've only played Destiny 2, the equivalent to tokens, but they're exclusive to the prestigious raid. And as you get more tokens, you unlock ornaments on the gear like you did in Wrath of the Machine, to where you have to do the prestigious raid, and instead of having the gear just get like lights on it or something like that, it actually gets more spikes on it, or like glowing gold lines that run down the length of it and that kind of thing. Just something that makes it look clearly different from how you acquire it for repeat completion. So like you start with a gear set that still outclasses, quote unquote, every other gear set in terms of coolness. And then in repeated runs, that gear set proceeds to become even cooler or something like that. Like, it really, really becomes a trophy to say, like, you know, in order to get this gear set, you had to have run the raid who knows how many times on your Titan, because otherwise they'll just have it where you do the challenge mode once, get all the gear, and then you're done. Yeah. And that would, like, I think that is how it's going to work too. When the challenge modes come out, if you do all the challenges in 1 week, I think you will get the full gear set, and then there's no, like, you literally will do the prestige raid once and have the maximum amount of cosmetics for it, and that's just that seems like that's making it too easy to burn through the content. But the problem that we have right now is that the emblem is not cool enough The fact that they made it rare, I don't know what they were
It doesn't.
thinking
It
with
doesn't
that.
even track how many raid completions you have. It doesn't track raid completions. It doesn't track,
It should track
prestige completions.
Raid kills. It should track raid kills. I would want to see
It
that.
should
That
track
would be the number one
something.
thing.
How about
Something.
let's start with anything. Number of
Yeah,
dregs.
not anything.
Like
Agreed.
something, like everything else has it. Trials has 2 emblems that count 2 different things, and the raid has 0.
Yeah, it's pretty dumb.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were thinking with that one.
What you were saying basically with upgradable cosmetic armor sets is pretty much exactly what I was going to say as well. Is something I was thinking about before we were going to do this. Is just basically upgradable ornaments on your armor, and to an extent that could work to a degree for most of the rest of the game. You want to make those future better devils interesting. Let me keep getting all my duplicate better devils, throwing them into my main one, and having my main one get upgraded in some way.
I think it would need to be more than cosmetic for guns.
Oh,
I don't
for
think
guns, yes,
I don't
absolutely.
think guns will. Yeah, cosmetics on guns is not going to fly. Also,
Yeah.
I mean, they've created an issue with themselves too, because now that we can apply shaders to our guns, when they reskin things, it looks that much more half-assed. Even though it's exactly what they did in Destiny 1, now that we have the power to apply shaders ourselves, if they apply a shader, it's just like that doesn't add any value at all. So
Yeah. Which is
it
why
kind of created an obstacle for them to solve.
Which is why I think they absolutely need to have new weapon models in the upcoming expansions. I don't think just a perk reset will be enough. It will definitely do things for some people, and some people at the very least will be happy that we had a perk refresh. But I think Bungie is going to get a lot of flack if they just end up using the same models and just do a perk refresh, as opposed to different models and perk refresh. So
They need to make better. They need to figure out a good way to make us have good guns too, because like it feels like we've got just a bunch of random rolls from Destiny 1, and those are our fixed rolls from Destiny 2. I don't know. That whole system needs to be looked at.
It is very difficult to create more powerful items when most of our gameplay is spent against enemies that never pose any sort of a threat to begin with, right? Like when a hand cannon is a one shot to a Dreg's head, how are you going to make that hand cannon more powerful? You just, what's more powerful than one shot? Staring at it.
You got to figure out how you make it better against the captain. How do you make it better against the fallen walker?
Right,
that kind of thing.
It's stuff like that. But again, I think being able to make things more powerful would be more feasible if we had more activities around the max light level cap to make it actually feel like, we are getting more powerful items, and I'm seeing that actually reflected in more moment-to-moment gameplay instead of just the raid or just the nightfall or something like that.
Yeah, I mean those exact activities. That's why very first things we were saying in the video, the fact that the enemies are harder to kill, it gives you more opportunity to feel powerful.
Yeah,
and then you also recently put out a video talking about exotics and random rolls, where you mentioned the power fantasy a bunch of times. Where if you one shot a dragon, it dies. That's cool, but if you one shot a dragon, it dies and it explodes. I mean, that adds to a power fantasy. It feels better, even if it's the gun didn't do anything more. It killed it in one shot either way, but when the dreg explodes, that feels good. And having that kind of stuff, that helps too.
Completely agree. Anything else that you would like to touch on? Because we are almost 2 hours deep.
No, I guess that pretty much sums it up.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me for the annual Elitist Roundtable discussion of the raid. We'll be back next year with whatever the raid is, or the next time there's a raid. I hope there's another raid before September, but we'll have to see about that. But otherwise, Slayer, where can people find you?
I am often on Twitch, twitch.tv/Slayerage. That's like Slayer Age. Pretty straightforward. That's where I am most of the time.
All right. I will link Slayerage and all of his social media, Garbo, in the description. Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Snapchat, LinkedIn.
Don't forget my MySpace.
Friendster, all that stuff in the description, along with his video on his thoughts on the end game situation. I think it's about a 27-minute long video, something like that. So it's another long video. But if you've made it through this, you clearly have no problem making it through very, very long-form content. And I thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this discussion, positive rating would be very appreciated. Slayer, once again, thank you very much for joining me on the round table.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a great conversation.
It was a good. I love having these long form conversations with you because I know we're pretty much on the same wavelength with a lot of stuff, and you always have very, very good insight to a lot of things. I know I'll come up with like a post, and you'll always manage to come in with like one or two more points that I just never even considered, and I was like, yeah, how that like that too? Like I didn't even think of that. So he's a very smart dude. Definitely check him out. Does crazy challenge stuff. All that good stuff. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you guys next time.